Oh yeah, and we're back at the Sports Experience Podcast with me, Chris Quinn, and my good friend Dom DiTolla. This episode, we're going to be talking about the versatile Charlie Ward.
Yeah, a little bit of college football, a little bit of pro basketball. This is a nice little mix of everything.
I always knew him as a New York Knick, and every time you'd watch him, they'd be like, and he was a college quarterback, and you'd just be like, no, yeah, I get it. But yeah, that's how I always knew him on those famous Knick teams.
Yeah, not only was he a famous basketball player, I mean, he started probably about a third of his career as a point guard for the Knicks. He is the first and only Heisman Trophy winning player to play in the NBA.
Yeah, which I found pretty awesome because obviously when you're a Heisman Trophy winner, you're pretty much like destined to be a first round pick. But as we see with Charlie, kind of went different for him.
Kind of went different because he had a lot of options due to his athletic prowess. My favorite part was when he played for the Knicks. The Jets and the Giants were so bad, and people would troll him and say he's the best quarterback in New York City, and he does not play professional football.
I absolutely loved that because, like, if you were a Jets and a Giants fan, you'd probably be like, hey, damn it, he's right. We're so bad right now.
You're just going to the Garden and watching Knicks games going, this blows.
Yeah. Quit throwing those spiral passes. God damn, man. Yeah, Charlie Ward was a very interesting athlete. That's what I have to put him in because he was even drafted into, because this is what I love about baseball.
Yeah.
In baseball's later rounds, they're just like, oh, you're a top athlete?
Yeah.
We'll draft you. And they did because he was that great of an overall athlete.
Oh, totally. No, I mean, played in high school, born October 12th, 1970 in Thomasville, Georgia. Actually a city that's produced, oddly enough, a lot of professional athletes.
Yeah.
But he went to Thomas County Central High School, baseball star, basketball star, football star, and that's kind of where he made his mark as far as going to the next level and in college.
Well, I wanted to bring this up because just if anybody doesn't know, college football is probably the sport that I least know about. Was FSU a big college at that point? Because I don't think they were.
Well, yes.
A powerhouse.
In by the late 80s, because they had already started accumulating a lot of talent.
Okay.
They were kind of built when Bobby Bowden left West Virginia for them, kind of in the late 70s. He had started accumulating a lot of talent because they went through some really crappy periods, even though Burt Reynolds played for them.
There you go.
Way back in the day.
That's the only thing. That's the only thing I knew about them pre them actually becoming like one of the Florida powerhouses.
Yeah, so they had finally got like a lot of good players, but their entire kryptonite this entire time, and it was Bobby Bowden's kryptonite until we'll later discuss this, was the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah.
And this is when it was the U to the max, like old school, just swag. And Florida State kind of built themselves along the same lines as Miami, and Charlie Ward is another one of those pieces, like a Deion Sanders or an Edgar Bennett or an Amp Lee or a Terrell Buckley.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
I mean, they're really starting to accumulate this talent. They just kind of need that quarterback to really push them over the edge. And when he goes to FSU, there are a glut of decent to good quarterbacks.
Yeah, I saw he didn't play his first 2 years.
Well, yeah, his freshman year, actually, in 89, he was punting for them.
Yeah.
And I found that fascinating, and I've seen clips of him punting, and he's pretty good at it.
I know. That's what an athlete he is literally you could probably put him at any position. I mean, size withstanding, everybody knows size and power kind of outweighs that, but any position that you could play, he could play, you know what I mean? Like wide receiver, cornerback, but I bet he could just really play all over.
Yeah,
you know?
because he had 2 years of where he just punted, and then he redshirted, and then he had another year as a backup because at this time, Florida State has like a mix of dudes. It's three guys, one of which actually won a Super Bowl in the future, although he wasn't even the main starter. So they had Casey Weldon, Peter Tom Willis, and their backup was Brad Johnson, who most famously of the Vikings and Buccaneers.
Yeah.
So Charlie kind of gets to sit behind those guys, and we'll get into his basketball career after we're done with his football career, but he gets to kind of just, learn the offense, get acclimated, but also do his thing on the basketball court.
Yeah, because I saw that unlike football, he started 4 years for FSU. Maybe not his freshman year, but he definitely was point guard, I think, for 3 of the 4 years. So
Yeah, and his first 2 years that he played basketball, he was starting and playing in all the games because he had the luxury of those other quarterbacks being there and playing to where he can like focus completely on basketball.
And just be their backup.
Yes, exactly. But by 1992, this is his first year as a starter. And he struggles a little bit, although Florida State keeps winning because they're just the most dominant team in the ACC.
Yeah, I saw that. He had a pretty good year, but you see that it wasn't perfect, if you will. And I don't mean perfect, but you see in 93, he had an unbelievable year.
Oh, totally.
But I think in 92, he had like 2,500 passing yards. And you know what I mean? Like, he definitely was, you could see, a great quarterback.
Yeah, 22 touchdowns, 17 picks, which is kind of why people were kind of waffling on him, going like, man, can he take care of the football? But you can just see this immense, like, talent. And just once it's like refined and honed, it's gonna just explode all over college football.
Yeah, once the edges are shaped down, you know, the mistakes are taken away, he's gonna really dominate.
And they were averaging 37.2 points a game that year, which was second in the nation.
Yeah.
And there was a very important game that year, kind of, you know, in the first quarter of the season against Georgia Tech, who was maybe 2 years removed from sharing a national championship. Bobby Bowden and the offensive staff decided, hey, let's do something called the fast break offense. And this is kind of what leads to him being such a great point guard and distributor.
Okay.
Is that lining up in shotgun. They have a lot of great running backs at this time. I mean, they are just absolutely loaded in the backfield, but they're going shotgun. I mean, they could have had a dominant running game, but you can see with Charlie, he is just the ultimate distributor of that football, and it's scaring the hell out of teams who like have never seen this before.
Oh, that's really interesting that they went so hard into the passing game, but it makes sense. And you look at some of these old FSU games from this 93 season, and he was really, really dominating.
And he could make plays with his legs. I mean, that first season he had over 500 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns rushing. But just a great receiving core, guys like Tamarick Vanover, Kes McCorvey, Matt Fryer, running backs, William Barnum-Floyd, Zach Crockett, Tiger McMillan. I mean, they really had a great team, and they won 11 games. Unfortunately, there was the game they lost, and this was the game against Miami.
Yep.
A year removed from the wide left game, they bring in a special kicker, and he goes wide right.
Yep.
And it's the only blemish on their record because at the end of the year, Charlie leads them into the Orange Bowl, and they beat Nebraska. And this is what we talked about in the Nebraska episode. Another Florida team just is their kryptonite in these big games, but they won 27-14 and were ranked in the top 10.
And stop that absolutely dominant Nebraska team from that Orange Bowl victory. We bring it up. Mm-hmm. They were just so good in that era that beating them, I bet going into that next year, they were like, oh shit, we're ready to
we're ready to rock
this.
And roll. I mean, you know, after the season, Charlie's kind of like the Heisman Trophy favorite. I mean, everyone's looking at him like, all right, this is your year, buddy. And he definitely impressed. He really impressed the following season because they go 12-1.
12-1. Who was their only loss against?
Well, I want to talk about this later because I remember watching this game.
I figured that's why I brought it up.
It was the last, in my opinion, important game that program had won. And everything after that has been just an absolute underachieving dumpster fire. But like the year before, they finished first in the nation again in scoring, but it's 41.2 points per game.
Yeah.
And then their defense, which was also really dominant. I mean, Hall of Famer Derek Brooks, Devin Bush. I mean, you are just stacked at all three levels on defense. They allowed less than 10 points per game.
That's pretty ridiculous. The 30-point margin of victory is because you have to realize that they're playing some bad teams, but they're also playing a ton of really good teams in their division. Miami, you know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting. The way this FSU, because like I was asking, like, was this when they started to be a dominant program? And you could see it really was.
Yeah, no, this was the year they finally break through. Like everything had been leading to 93 for this entire program and for Bobby Bowden because, and we'll talk about in that bowl game where they end up playing Nebraska, is that Bobby Bowden and Tom Osborne neither had won a national championship.
Yep.
So it's like, well, someone's going to break through.
Exactly.
This year. But their defense, like I said before, in their first 9 games, they had 4 shutouts. I mean, they were just destroying people. And I think the key to this, and it really is Charlie just piloting everything as the distributor, he improved his completion percentage from 56% in 92 to almost 70% in 1993.
Jeez.
And at that time, even though you're kind of running that fast break offense, which is a lot of what you see with the spread now, your completion percentage numbers are inflated. He's still throwing NFL routes and doing it accurately. Like, you can see that improvement where, as opposed to having 12 games under his belt, to now like 20 plus as a starter.
And it seems like the volume of passes have gone up. So if the volume of passes are going up and his completion rate is going up, it's all gravy for FSU this year.
Yeah, and honestly, through those first 9 games, they're just kicking the crap out of everybody, ACC, non-conference, and Miami.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they enter November 13th, 1993, ranked number 1. And they go to South Bend to play Notre Dame, which at that time was also undefeated, who was ranked number 2.
Yes.
And a lot of people consider this game the game of the century for both programs. And it's a high-scoring affair. I mean, offense back and forth, just a big play game with big-time athletes at the college level. And to their credit, Notre Dame breaks up a pass at the goal line to win the game at the very end. But Ward leads them on just a furious comeback. And Notre Dame really, if they had kept extending that game, Florida State likely would have come back and won.
Yeah, I watched the end of that. They definitely had all the momentum, but that stop at the goal line, it's one of those classic plays where it wins a game.
And Charlie played well enough to where, and so did the entire team, or they really didn't fall in the rankings very far. I think they went down to number 2 or number 3.
Number 3, yeah.
They really, it wasn't like they went to South Bend and just, laid down for them. It was just not their day.
Yeah.
And a team who was just as good beat them.
Yeah, exactly.
But luckily for Charlie, luckily for him and the Noles, the following week, Notre Dame absolutely shits the bed against Tom Coughlin's Boston College team and loses on a last-second field goal, which allows Florida State to jump back to number 2, or stay at number 2 because Notre Dame falls to 3 because Nebraska is ranked number 1. So they get to draw Nebraska in the Orange Bowl.
It's almost like we've brought up this little sequence before. I love
Everything
it.
like spiderwebs out. But they go into this game against Nebraska, and it's a defensive struggle.
Oh, for sure.
It is a slobber knocker, if you want to call it.
I love that. So please call it that.
All right, slobber knocker. But, both defenses are really taking it to each other. And Florida State, to their credit, at the very end, thanks to a pass interference penalty, drives the ball all the way down. They're down, and they kick a field goal to go up 18-16.
Yeah.
And Nebraska almost gets into field goal range on that final drive, and they do, and they don't make the kick.
Yeah.
But at that point, Noles are national champions, and Charlie Ward already won the Heisman Trophy that year, by the way, for all of his incredible play on the field.
Because they award the trophy before the bowl games, which we've brought up before, which is bullshit.
Sometimes they hand them out before the regular season finales. Ty Detmer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but that's what we see with Charlie Ward. He is this great offensive general, and that's why going into what we're going to talk about him choosing the NBA, which is why it's so surprising.
It is, because he swept all the 93 college football awards. I'm just going to read them off here. Heisman Trophy, the Maxwell Award, Walter Camp, the Johnny Unitas, the Davey O'Brien, the Sullivan Award. I mean, ACC Offensive Player of the Year that year. ACC Player of the Year in 92 and 93.
Yes.
2-time All-American. I mean, this is a guy, when you look at this track record and then just his tape too, you're thinking this guy's a shoo-in in the NFL.
Top 10 pick, and if he goes beyond that, people are going to be like, wait, what? But that wasn't the case.
No, that wasn't the case.
I thought it was interesting, something that I saw, that he won the Heisman with like the 4th highest margin. So and you list the other guys, it was like O.J. Simpson. It was like these guys that you're just like, oh yeah. So like he was like, with all these records, with all these titles that he won, whatever individual accomplishments, You could just like, if you just looked at these things, you would be like, oh, this guy's number 1 pick. How's he even, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Or at least he will be drafted by someone.
There you go.
And
I just mean like number 1 quarterback pick,
oh yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and well, I'll get into it right now.
Yeah.
Kind of the reason why he's not drafted is because of his basketball career, and played for the Noles, redshirted his first year for basketball, but played 90 to 94. Was on some really talented teams with NBA guys like Bob Searle was there, Doug Edwards, Sam Cassell.
I thought that was interesting. I forgot about that, and I was like, man, that was a good backcourt.
Yeah, and he is their point guard, obviously, and does pretty well. I mean, full-time starter, first 2 years, 8 points per game, 3.4 assists, 2.4 steals. Next year, 7.2 points per game, 4 assists, 2.7 steals. So, I mean, he's not necessarily a scorer, but just like he is on the football field, he's piloting everything.
Hey, everybody. Just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs.
Yes, he's what you want from not a scoring point guard. So he's great defensively, which I love this statistic. He holds FSU's steals record.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, he's really a great point guard for what you want, not a scorer, but everything else.
And sometimes you'll see that, though. You'll look up like stats like that. I know at San Diego State, Tony Gwynn is still their assist leader.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh, you don't even play that sport anymore.
Exactly. And you see these multi-sport athletes, that's how great they are. Heisman Trophy winner and steals leader. I think he also holds the most steals in a game for 9.
And you think, and what makes it incredible is while he played full-time those first 2 years, he was relegated to playing basically only the back half of the Noles schedule his final 2 years.
Yeah, because the football, they overlap.
Yeah, they totally overlap and both seasons that he was starting at quarterback, they're in New Year's Day bowl games.
Yep.
So he's not done until January 2nd.
I think they said he got 16 games in his senior season.
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome to come in right off of a football season and then go right into a basketball season.
And his junior year, this first year where he started playing quarterback, 7.8 points per game, 5.5 assists, and then 2.8 steals. And that team went all the way to the Elite 8.
Yeah.
Like, they made postseason trips all 3 first years. That was their deepest run. But his senior year, he really gets to showcase for everyone what he can do in that back half of the schedule because he's over 10.5 points per game, 4.9 assists, and 2.8 steals. Well, they didn't make the tournament and kind of underachieved. You could see that this guy has NBA ability.
I was going to say, it felt like the pieces around him had already left. Sam Cassell, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So, it was really him out there by himself. But he showed everybody, like, hey, I'm an NBA point guard. Like what I think he was pretty much saying, like, I'm an NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
And people were like, maybe.
Maybe not, but hey, you're also an NBA point guard. And he was playing semi-pro. And he has talked about this after the basketball season, kind of leading into the NBA draft, where he was like, look, I'm going to these and I'm going to these combines. If I can play at that level and do very well, man, I might have a shot at this.
Yeah.
And his mindset and the mindset of his agent were, you know what? I actually have options, so I'm going to explore them. The problem is the NFL doesn't like people with options. They like to lock you in and not square pegging around hole you. You know what I mean?
That is very accurate. And I found it interesting. I brought it up to you pre-podcast, what you thought of his chances of being an NFL quarterback, because he was slightly undersized. This wasn't a running quarterback league, if you know what I mean.
It wasn't a running quarterback league, but he wasn't necessarily a running quarterback. He just had the ability to use his legs to get out of trouble.
Okay.
Like, he was never a default runner.
Like we see today.
Like, he's not like a Cam Newton. This is a drop back passer, somebody who can operate in a spread offense and really distribute the ball and make smart choices with it.
So what was the thing that NFL teams were so hesitant on, I guess is what I'm...
And also, he was skinny. He was not small. He was about 6'2", 190. Not necessarily a big guy, but he had the height to play in the NFL.
Okay.
Probably could have used an extra maybe 20 pounds at least.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like he was small. The way the NFL offenses ran, though, at that time, even though you have like a West Coast offense and things based on timing, they weren't spreading the field like you see. Maybe teams like Atlanta at that time who were still running the run and shoot with June Jones. Yeah, okay, you can see that happening there. But NFL teams were so stuck in the past, they really didn't know what to do with him.
So it was more of a scheme.
It was a lot of scheme stuff because they had never seen someone like this before. And honestly, I think he could have done it and done it the NFL's way if there was a team who was willing to take a chance and have the time and patience on him, like draft him in the middle rounds, stash him on the bench for maybe 2 years, and then like behind a veteran quarterback who's smart, and I know we'll talk about that.
Yep.
But just like develop him. It's not like he's a finished product coming out of college, but you have this interesting athlete. And even his agent said, like, look, probably not going to go first round, but probably third to fifth round is what we're thinking. And when they had said we're going to explore their options, a lot of NFL teams took it as if he's not picked in the first round or the first quarterback off the board, we're not going to take him.
Yeah,
he's not worth it. He's concentrated on other things. And it's like, man, he's sitting on a golden ticket. Why not? He's 2 golden tickets. Let's see what happens.
I saw that he kind of came out and said that people were putting those words in his mouth, like, if I don't go first round, I don't go at all. And he's like, I never said anything like that. I'm just putting myself out there for both drafts. And like you said, the NFL hated that.
And his honesty is honestly what killed him.
Yeah.
Because he was like, no, I'm going to explore basketball because I can play in this league.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know why they were so crappy towards him. Maybe it's just because he was a quarterback and possibly because he was a black quarterback.
Whoa. It's not 2020 anymore. No, but yeah, that I wonder if the racism in this quarterback scheme, because in this era, black guys were looked at as receivers, running backs.
Yeah. So it's not like he was treated, like gold, like a Bo Jackson or a Deion Sanders who were like, I want to explore my options. I want to see what's out there. I mean, Bo Jackson, baseball was his first sport.
Yeah.
He didn't join the Raiders until like mid-season every single year he played for them based on that. And do you think Al Davis gave a shit? No.
Yeah.
He's just like, Bo's here. Everything's good. All right.
His is probably the most interesting draft story with the Buccaneers just totally sandbagging his college career. But that's a whole nother.
Yeah, totally.
But we see he didn't have the blowback that Charlie Ward had.
Yeah, Charlie Ward had an intense amount of blowback from the NFL. And when you look at the quarterbacks that were taken at the top of that draft, Heath Shuler and Trent Dilfer, despite the fact Dilfer won a Super Bowl, but that was all the defense that year. Let's get that straight. But so Charlie was just like, no, I'm going to explore my options. He goes undrafted, but there's a team that really wanted to do what I had explained before is take him, in the middle rounds or towards the end or even as an undrafted free agent.
Yeah.
Sign him, put him behind a veteran quarterback, and that was Kansas City. And Kansas City had Joe Montana, and they were like, Lamar Hunt, who was the owner at that time, was absolutely in love with Charlie Ward. He thought, this is a dynamic player. We just need to get him in here. We're not going to spend a lot of draft capital on him, but if he's willing to play for us, this is the heir apparent to Joe freaking Montana here.
Yeah, well, they even approached him. I thought it was interesting. They even approached him while he was a pro basketball player, and just to gauge whether or not he wanted to be Joe Montana's backup. Which I feel like that is probably one of the only offers where you're like, hold on, maybe, because I bet you could see the path of becoming a starting quarterback.
And really, if he had gone there and was Montana's backup for a year, that would have been just a fascinating NFL career. But we'll never know what it is. Because at the end of June, the NBA draft occurs.
Yep.
And towards the end of the first round with the 26th pick, the New York Knicks take Charlie Ward to play basketball.
It was a great pick.
And in the NBA, I think it's even still now, if you are drafted in the first round, you are on a guaranteed contract for your rookie deal, and you are making a lot more money than you would be as a mid-round NFL player or even an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, we explored this before. It's weird. I feel like we're bringing up old podcasts.
I know.
But the NFL union is so bad that it's not even that the NBA players union is super great, but they have it established to where if you're like a first rounder, you're going to make serious money, which is the way it should be. Because that's where the stars come out of.
Exactly. And the saddest part, though, is we'll never know. We'll never know. Like, I remember I got a set of old NFL draft cards for the 94 class.
Okay.
included in that card set is a Charlie Ward card.
In a basketball uniform?
No, what should have been, but no, it goes into on the back of the card, 1993 Heisman Trophy winner, Charlie Ward, undrafted. Like they went out and still made a football card for Charlie Ward.
As they should have.
Yeah, as they totally should have.
But like you said in the beginning of the episode, for many years he was considered the best quarterback in New York while he played for the Knicks.
Yeah, he played for the Knicks.
Yeah.
Oh, God. That had to be just so painful, like sitting at the Garden and watching the Knicks be good and being like, why are our football teams awful? Why does Dave Brown and Boomer Esiason suck so hard, you know?
But that's New York football.
Well, it's totally New York
especially
football.
in the 90s.
Well,
so.
yeah, it was probably just as bad as it is today with the Giants and
That's
Jets.
what I was just going to bring up. They're the two great football franchises of New York.
But to Charlie's credit, though, and I always maintain this when guys are making choices between like football and baseball or football and basketball, he made over $30 million in his NBA career. So, I mean, doesn't have any health issues like a lot of football players either, you know, has taken care of his body. And, you know, he was from the jump, he was a good role player for the Knicks and eventual starter.
Yeah. He didn't end up playing his first season. Pat Riley was the coach, and Pat, like a great coach, like they probably would have done in football, benched him.
Yeah.
Let him figure out what the system was, and then in his second season, he pretty much became their point guard for almost a decade.
Yeah, and even when he wasn't the point guard, he's the first guy off the bench.
Yes.
You know, he's a valuable role player in the NBA, and you can just stack that money, you know, and just live a dream that a lot of people can't do.
Well, like we see, this is when money gets injected in the NBA. Literally 94 is when money's like, hey, these are real contracts. And you're just like, oh, shit, hell yeah. So... yeah,
Totally. No, and then we want to go into some of his that Heat series. That
I was going to say
series.
The Knicks in this era are almost renowned for losing late playoff games. So they almost never make it to the finals, and they almost always lose to Chicago
or Miami. And the funny thing about that is, or even Indiana, they oh boy, Reggie Miller.
That was a great rivalry that. It comes out of nowhere.
And it's funny because Pat Riley, you know, he was the head coach for Showtime with the Lakers.
Yep.
All those Knicks teams, this was in the 90s in the NBA where you could play defense. And they're legal, you couldn't play zone, and it was all man-to-man, and you had Ewing and Oakley in that front court just beating the ever-loving, and Anthony Mason just beating the ever-loving piss out of people.
Well, that's why Jordan's scoring is so ridiculous, because the scoring in the NBA was so much less at that point, where he was scoring like 50% of his team's baskets.
Yeah.
And because,
doing it against the Knicks where he's getting hand-checked and shoved and shit.
Yeah. Oakley, who came from Chicago, was probably one of the hardest power forwards to play against. And you could see those old school, when you took it to the rim, they weren't just going to let you take it to the rim.
No, you had to earn that.
Yeah.
And but Riley leaves, but Jeff Van Gundy just keeps that, you know, hack and train rolling for him. And they're in the, I believe, 97 Eastern Conference semis against the Heat, and they're up 3-1 in the series.
Yeah, they look like they're about to close out the series.
The series and see the Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals. And that doesn't happen, and Charlie Ward is kind of a reason it doesn't happen, and it's not necessarily his fault.
Well, I want to bring this up for the NBA rules at that time. So if there was a fight on the court and the benches cleared, the guys on the benches would get suspended.
Yeah.
During this game, pretty much the starters of New York were on the bench, and pretty much the starters of Miami were on the court.
Yeah.
So there was a free throw. Charlie Ward, I think it was a free throw. Charlie Ward goes to box out P.J. Brown,
who's like a very large individual,
and he gets angry.
Yes, P.J. Brown is not happy.
Pretty much just picks him up and body slams him
into the camera people.
It's pretty ridiculous, and you can see why the bench is clear.
And it sets off a melee, and Jeff Van Gundy is trying to drag or grab Alonzo Mourning's leg.
Yep. And he drags him.
But Alonzo Mourning's just like, get the hell off me. Come on.
It's if you ever want to go back and watch that, it's sad and funny, and it's sad because literally like Starks, Ewing, I think Alonzo Mourning.
Charlie Ward was even suspended.
Charlie Ward.
And he didn't even do shit.
And the thing was, they all got suspended until a lot of them got suspended until Game 6, and then I think a couple of them got suspended until Game 7, so they were out the whole series.
Yeah.
And we see that Miami Heat go on to win the next
3 in a row.
Three in a row. It's really shitty, but if you're thinking like PJ Brown and you're a Miami Heat fan, you're like, guy's a genius.
Yeah, I know, right? That guy is so smart.
Yep, because he pretty much, I mean, that's what switched that series around. And that was, in this Knicks team, that was the Knicks team that people thought could go on and beat the Bulls.
Yeah, that was because, the Bulls dynasty's kind of fading a little bit at this point.
Yep.
And unfortunately for New York, they can't pull through. But 2 years later, they do get revenge on the Heat because in their first round playoff series, they're an 8 seed and Miami's a 1.
And a 1.
And the Knicks not only win that series, Charlie Ward as their starting point guard, they roll all the way to the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
And obviously they lose to San Antonio, but Charlie Ward was a starting point guard on an NBA Finals team.
Yeah.
And he probably was a better quarterback than basketball player.
Which is, if you look at his college career, you almost have to say that that's true. So he could have been one of the greater quarterbacks of this late 90s.
And yeah, and he could have, honestly, and when playing for the Knicks, he played for him for 10 years. And he put up similar stats to what he did in college.
Yeah.
And, 6.3 career points per game, 4.0 assists, and I believe 1.7 steals.
Well, I just feel like he was that floor general that you could bring in and be secure with.
Everybody, you know what you're getting out of him. You know he's going to make the smart choices. You know he's going to, run the floor for everyone and distribute. It's interesting, but it's so sad.
Yeah.
Because, plays for the Knicks for 10 years, kind of has some stints in Houston and San Antonio, quick ones, but, injuries had, affected him. Nothing like CTE, but I mean, you could tell guy in his mid-30s, it's time to go. It's time to retire. And, kudos to him for making the best out of a situation that, it's still a dream for most people, but having one dream crushed and then living another one.
Yeah.
That is very impressive to me.
I got to bring up his eastbound and down moment.
Oh, he had a very interesting eastbound and down moment.
Was that when he played for the Knicks?
It was indeed.
And I
2001.
I feel like they were like, all right, we'll trade you.
Well, he lasted 3 more years after this, but you can go into it.
Well, he was, and I think he was at church. He's a Christian.
Yes, he's a very religious person. Yeah, it was a team Bible study that was supposedly closed off to the media, but he had made some. Let's just say he made some comments where he was a DUI and calling a female officer sugar tits away from being Mel Gibson.
Man, he was about to give us all a Braveheart, but he said something about Jews being stubborn.
The quote is,
yes.
Jews are stubborn. Tell me, why did they persecute Jesus unless he knew something they didn't want to accept? They have his blood on their hands.
Yes. And then
God.
This is the worst part of when athletes don't understand why they're being extremely offensive and then they almost double down on it. So like the media was like, would you like to explain those? And he was just like, I was just meaning like the Jews are stubborn when I try to get them to transition to Christianity. And it's like, wait, what?
The worst part was when he said, I have a Jewish friend. His name is Jesus Christ. And you play in New York.
Yeah, so that's what makes me think of the eastbound and down, where he pretty much just says the most ridiculous stuff. But you could see how, I guess, oblivious to the people being offensive he was. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty ridiculous. But if that's the worst thing that he did, I got it, because we go through some guys and they do some awful stuff. And if that's the worst, I got to give it up to Charlie Ward.
They do some repugnant shit, and he apologized, and I'm sure he was like, yeah, that probably wasn't a good idea.
Yes, exactly.
But no, I mean, he was he finished out his career, great college basketball player. In 2011, he got the Keys to Life Award at the Final Four. It's one of the John Wooden Awards for his excellence and integrity on and off the court.
He had a ton of work in different foundations, different stuff. So like, if anything, I know we brought up the Jew comments, but if anything, we should be bringing up the great stuff he does off the court, because he really has done a ton of stuff and is a great family man. So like, really got to give it up to Charlie Ward. I love the fact that he's the only Heisman Trophy winner to start in the NBA.
Yeah, and not start, but play well.
Yeah.
But, post-career, he has 3 kids, so he's done a lot of coaching. He's a high school coach for football.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he, I believe, still heads Florida State's kind of like feeder high school.
Okay.
He's coaching there. I mean, he's still involved with the game, probably passing down all the knowledge that he gained. Definitely works with kids and things like that. He has 3 kids. So, he's stayed around football and stayed around sports, and credit to him for doing that. He's just such an interesting figure that almost is now forgotten.
Yeah.
And unless you're talking about not FSU's 93 national championship team, his name doesn't come up a lot in football.
No.
I mean, and it's sad because if he had come out today, he's a top 5 pick.
Yeah, there's no doubt that a team wouldn't even consider that rolling the dice.
No.
You know what I mean? They would be like, oh, yeah, we're going to develop him into what we want.
This is our guy. This is a guy that fits. This is a guy who's doing what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And, kudos to you, Charlie Ward. This is a really fun research topic. So, yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hey, everybody. This is just a stock message at the end of every episode. We hope you enjoyed whatever athlete and or team that episode was about. Just want to say, give us a quick follow on all social media. We have a YouTube channel, the Sports Experience Podcast, and we're on Instagram, DiTolla Dominic, and myself, C. Quinn Comedy. So give us a follow all around. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.